performance? Like, would you be in the middle of one, you'd be like, this is really good, we should...
Yeah, you know, we've talked about it a lot. We've talked about just, you know, filming one, doing a film of one, an actual film of one, and we've talked about just, you know, having the readings as something that we could film and then just stream, like to high schools or something, just because it's really a lovely experience. It's very casual. Nobody's off book. Everybody's nervous, but also having a lot of fun and you know, an intermission talking about the parts of the play, and especially with something like Winter's Tale, which we know as well, and how it's progressing. And we talk about it all the time, but of course that's a huge step. And part of the joy of the thing is, you know, one of my rules is no matter how often they ask, no casting directors are allowed to come, because you never want to turn it into a thing until you decide that you're going to. It is a real release, and it's a safe place.
Who do you like to play when you do these?
Well, I made a sort of devil's bargain when we first began with James Marsters and Tony. They were the two guys that I put my head with and said, let's do this, and at some point, James will get to be Macbeth, Tony will get to be Richard III, and I will get to be Hamlet. And I waited for about 2 years. I waited a long time. I carried my spears. I did get a few meaty roles because sometimes people don't show up. Iago didn't show up. That's cool. But and eventually I got to, you know, fulfill my living room dream of reading Hamlet, and it was one of the best days I'll ever have. That's a kind of thing. Sorry?
Give us some lines.
Yeah, good question. Give us some lines. Did it feel like a Joss Whedon show to you?
No.
If they help the contestant, do I still get the money?
And did it change, and when did it change, if it changed?
I'm sure I don't know what you mean. It did at first, but it also felt like a departure. I mean, even the original pitch, which has fallen somewhat by the wayside, felt like territory I'd not charted, and kind of funky and kind of intense. But at the same time, to me, it felt very natural. It's not like I'm trying to just, you know, throw people off, or, well, I've never done this. You know, these stories that come from me are me stories.
Well, if I can just say that just as a viewer, it seems like the hard thing in this show, the premise of the show built in, is that you've got a show where a good portion of your central characters are completely blank and are wiped clean. Their minds are wiped clean at the end of every episode, and so it's hard to bond to them. And it's also hard, I would imagine, to have any kind of continuing storyline, and it seems like a real puzzle. And as season 1 went on, I remember admiring just like the ingenuity of like you guys trying to like have feelings in them. Like there's the episode where you decide like how do we get because there's the actors, and then there's like the people who are sort of suits who are sort of running the actors, and at some point around episode 6 or 7, you just get everybody stoned. Like there's an episode let's just get everybody stoned and let's get to know them that way. It's incredible. Like I just learned something there. This thing, like did you feel like you came into discovering kinds of problems with making the stories work and solutions, and how do you see that whole thing?
Yeah. Basically, you've hit the nail on the head, sir. To me, the part about the actives being blank was not the issue, because the show that I had in mind moved much more slowly and sort of spent more time in the minutiae of the place. And then, you know, it came down from on high that it should be more of a thriller. And that kind of threw us off because, yes, it's very hard to sustain a thriller with somebody who's blank. But the thing that I loved about it, besides the idea that she'd get to do all these different things and that Eliza would get to do all these things that I knew she was capable of, that people didn't really see, romantic comedy type stuff, and you know, playing someone who's actually classy and all this stuff. She's tough girl, concerned girl, tough and concerned. The Bring It On girl is both tough and concerned. The thing that I loved about it was her emerging identity, the idea, the sort of Frankenstein story of her going, oh my God, not just who was I, but I exist. Like, these are my hands. I am in a world. Things are happening to me. And we just sort of had to, like, put that on the fast track where I really had intended to sort of move more slowly with it. And I thought it was something that if you really got sucked in, if I could build this sort of very personal and hypnotic world, that people would respond to it. I may be wrong, they may never have, but you're right to say that it became the central problem of the show, that and that it was just a wee bit prostitute-y. which was skosh too hoary. And actually, well, this is the thing. When they heard the premise, it sounded cool, it sounded sexy, it sounded right. There was, you know, I never had a better meeting, I never was more prepared, I had everything mapped out, episodes, seasons, I had a one sheet, it was like, boom, it just flowed. And they were all, so they ordered, you know, they did a full order of what was 7 and then became 13, and then I believe it was, you know, Peter Chernin who said, sounds kind of like prostitutes. That's not okay. The thing, you know, the thing that I wanted to go to a pretty dark place, not as dark as anything in the real world of like this, but I wanted to sort of, you know, get a little tough with our ideas about sexuality and control and all these things and fantasy, and, you know, put everybody in everybody's corner, and then where it came down, that's not going to be okay. You know,
do you mean actually like that the show, like in the way it was built, you were going to make us feel weird about the fact that they were prostitutes at points? Like you were going to... Yeah,
I wanted people to feel bad about feeling good and good about feeling bad, and all of those things entwined, because I think ultimately a lot of our fantasies are about either being completely in control or being completely helpless, or being someone else. There are many different levels of fantasy, and when I say fantasy, I'm talking about fantasy because obviously if you get into the reality of something, you know, where people are, you know, not themselves and are doing all these things, then it's grotesque. But in a fantasy, this is very much a part of that world for a lot of people. But Fox was very anxious to back away from those implications and get on with the gunning down of people, which is perfectly okay. And ultimately, you know, that's something that, although we're having a great time with the second season, we've never recovered from. So your original question is very true. Breaking Stories is, every episode is ridiculously hard in a way that it wasn't in the other shows, because what was to be the sort of central core has been ripped out just enough so that we are constantly dancing around our own premise.
And some of the